Welcome to Courageous Conversations. Before we start today, I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on what always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I thank the Aboriginal people for their custodianship of the land. I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, and any Aboriginal people joining us today. Courageous Conversations encourages individuals, organisations and communities to have conversations that challenge sexist comments, discrimination and disrespectful behaviour. Through these discussions and actions, we can create a culture that is free from rigid gender stereotypes and a community where all men and women and boys and girls feel safe, included and respected. During this program, we encourage you to consider what gender equity and respect means to you and to your community. This is Session 5, Be an Active Bystander.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for Session 5 of our Courageous Conversations series. And today we're going to focus on being a bystander. And my name's Liam Dooley, and I'm here with my colleague Jules.
Hi Liam, my name's Jules and I am a daughter, a sister, mother, a wife. I'm also the area manager for Western Sydney for Mission Australia. Thanks for having me today. I'm looking forward to doing this session with you.
Absolutely. And so today, as mentioned, we're going to be focusing on being a bystander. And we're going to look at a couple of different elements of that. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about what it actually means to be a bystander. And we're going to unpack different scenarios and examples where you might find yourself being in a situation where you're called on to be a bystander. And we're going to chat about some of those challenges and also, most importantly, talk about what are some of the tools and techniques that can help you to be more confident and effective in being a bystander and therefore playing a really important role in creating a community and creating a culture that calls out and doesn't condone violence against women. And importantly, as with a lot of these conversations we're having, it can be very difficult and it can be a challenging conversation to have. And there might even be some people at home who have experienced violence or who have people close to them who might have experienced violence. So if at any point you feel that it's difficult to continue, please do have a break, take care of yourself. Or it might be that you don't feel comfortable continuing, and that's more than okay. And if you do need to get some sort of support or somebody to talk to, then please contact 1-800-RESPECT, and the number is there on your screen.
So we're going to talk about bystanders today, and we need to understand what that is, Liam, because not everybody understands what a bystander is. So I think we need to start with a definition. So a bystander is a person who observes a conflict or unacceptable behaviour. It might be something serious or minor, one time or repeated, but the bystander knows that the behaviour is unacceptable. It's destructive or likely to make a bad situation worse. An active bystander takes steps that can make a difference. Now, you know this is happening because you always feel like you see it and you kind of go, in your gut, you go, oh, I want to do something, but I might not know what to do.
Yeah.
And so that's when you're being a bystander.
Yeah.
So we've got the definition.
Yeah. And as you say, we know that these scenarios come up all the time, don't they? Once you understand, you go, okay, this happens all around us all the time. So in talking about examples where being a bystander might be something that you need to do, then let's start with a really simple example that I think is very common for lots of people, and that's hearing a sexist joke. And you might have heard one maybe when you've been out at a party, or you might have even heard it at work, or you might have even heard it in your family, and it's something that you hear, but I think most people can probably admit that maybe they've laughed at it before, or maybe they've even made the sexist comments themselves, or the sexist jokes themselves. So we might just start by looking through, well, what are some of the options or the thoughts that people sometimes have when they might hear a sexist joke? So starting off, maybe some of you at home would think, well, I'm not going to do anything about it because it doesn't matter, it's not a problem. Or some of you might even think, I'm not going to do anything because maybe it's none of my business. And some of you might even go a step further to think, well, I'd like to do something about it, but I don't really know how, and I'm not really sure what's going to happen. And then there might also be some people who are watching that say, well, if I hear something, I'm going to say something about it. And there's lots of these different options that people have. So I guess, first of all, if we look at the first one, which is there's nothing wrong with it, is there something wrong with it? I mean, surely it's just a joke, Jules.
Well, unfortunately, when we have somebody making these kind of jokes and the people around us are laughing, if I'm experiencing violence, if I'm a victim of violence, and I see my colleagues or my friends or just strangers laughing, then I think that the violence that is happening to me must be okay because everybody else is laughing. And if I'm the one that's doing the violence, then I believe that my behaviour is okay because you're all laughing at what I'm doing. And so these kind of situations make this okay for people. And so these kind of jokes, it doesn't help our situation out there. But we've all been there as a bystander. I mean, myself included. Somebody makes one of these jokes and you kind of go, oh. And I think you hold your breath for that, 10 seconds, and you kind of look around and you think, what do I do?
Yeah,
what do I do in this moment? And I think we've all been there.
That's right.
And I think that's why we want to go through the options around what can we do? What's the practical tools around how do we hold ourselves in this situation?
That's right.
And what can we do differently? What can be courageous around challenging when everybody seems to be laughing? Because I'm sure you're not the only person that's standing there going, I'm not comfortable in this situation.
Absolutely. And a lot of people might just think, well, it's just a joke, what difference can it make? And maybe it doesn't have any harm. But what we understand is that it's the small behaviours and the small disrespect towards women that we let go that creates a culture that condones and supports violence against women. And you might go, well, I'd never be violent against a woman, and neither would any of my mates, so why does it matter if it has the joke? But the problem is that you never know that if there's someone who is being abusive or willing to be abusive or violent, then those jokes and those messages reinforce to those people that behaviour is okay. So we might just move on to, I guess, another scenario.
The party.
The party.
Oh, the party.
And this is maybe just sort of looking at, I guess, again, sort of looking at what some of those thoughts that come into play, because when you hear these situations, as we said before, it can be very uncomfortable and lots of different things can roll through your mind.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've all sat at a party and you're all having a good time. And then you hear a comment and it's one of your friends or maybe even somebody you don't really know that well, but you're at a friend's house and they say something quite disrespectful to their partner, and you kind of all look around and you kind of go, surely somebody else is going to say something, right? Because then I don't have to, because you don't want to be the one, right? You don't want to be that person that's going to go, that's not okay. And that's the moment, right then that you're now being a bystander in this situation, because we're all standing there in this moment going, okay, I didn't like that. And we're all thinking, you have this whole conversation that happens in 30 seconds in your mind. If my husband said that, I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't like that. Should I say something? Why isn't anybody else saying something? Surely somebody's going to say something. Yeah. And this happens really fast in your mind. But we want to talk about how can we say something? What are you going to do? And so the things that you're thinking is, I don't want to draw attention to myself. I don't want everyone looking at me. It's better if I just keep the peace. I just want to keep it friendly. We're all friends here. Let's just keep it peaceful. You think, it might make it worse for my friend. I might not get invited back to the party. And these are some of the things that we're all concerned about. Yeah.
And it's natural. It's natural.
Absolutely.
And being a bystander isn't easy, and it's something that takes practice, doesn't it? Because what you're doing is actually challenging the conditions in our society, and these are things that we've all grown up with, and you might be challenging your friends or your family, and that's not an easy thing to do. So the first thing might be that you might have been in a scenario in the past, and maybe you should have said something, or you really wanted to say something, but maybe you didn't feel comfortable. So maybe take a moment just to have a think about whether those scenarios have come up in the past, and have a think about maybe what you could have done at the time, or maybe when something happens again, what you might do in the future. And Jules, have you had those moments before where you look back and wish that you'd said something that you didn't?
Absolutely. There was this time at a wedding and my husband and I were sitting at a table, and I didn't really know the table very well, but I knew the bride. And the couple that was sitting to our left, he just says quite clearly to his partner, I don't know why they spent so much on the wedding. If she turns out anything like you, it won't be worth it. And the whole table just went completely silent. And I was having this exact conversation in my head, like, I've got to say something. That nobody deserves that. But I don't think anybody took a breath. It was, it felt like hours in my head and at the table, but it was only seconds. And we all were silent, and we all had this awkward look around the table where we all looked at each other's eyes, but nobody looked at the couple. And then both of them got up and left the table. And so then nobody knew what to do, and we all just stood there. And I've reflected on that moment so many times because I just thought, that poor woman, how embarrassed she must have been.
Absolutely.
And it was an opportunity to have that conversation or to say something, but I missed it. I missed it completely. And, I've reflected quite a bit. And you just think, well, all I can do is learn from that and to keep doing it, because it takes practice. And we're not always going to get it right. Even with everything I know, I still miss opportunities, and I have to just be okay and know that all I can do is my best. And my belief is that you have to keep trying and you have to keep practicing.
Absolutely. And I think I have countless circumstances, particularly, growing up where, that idea that boys will have certain banter that often gets excused away as boys just being boys, but it can be different behaviours of disrespecting women that at the time you thought wasn't even that big a deal, or exactly as you just thought at the time, it's wrong. You get that feeling in your stomach, but you don't feel comfortable saying anything. And I think it's only through practicing and, as you say, learning and reflecting on the times that you could have said something that you get a bit better with it each time, and it enables you to be able to do these things more confidently.
So, Liam, there are risks to speaking out. And you don't get to decide how people are going to react to what you say. We can only decide what we're going to say, and we can't always control what everybody else is going to do. So can you think of a time where you told somebody something that you couldn't control what they were going to say, and that you were quite surprised about their reaction?
Yeah. I've been both sort of disappointed in my surprise before, but I've also been surprised when I've needed to call out certain behaviours. And when, I guess, in some of those negative situations, I've called out in the past close friends who might have said things that have varied between, some disrespectful comments to having bigger concerns about the way that they might have been treating their partner. And in a couple of those circumstances, calling out the behaviour was met with a bit of frustration. And some by people that I thought might be more willing to take some of those comments on board. And so that's prepared me for the fact that when you call different behaviour out, sometimes there's only so much you can do. And some of those friendships I no longer have, because I've just decided that I've got a certain set of values about how you treat women, and those people weren't willing to, I guess, be part of that value set as well. But at the same time, I've had many circumstances where I've been really pleasantly surprised. And I think that can be a really powerful reminder of why it's so important that I've been in groups and called out negative comments or disrespectful comments. And even sometimes at the time, people mightn't say much about it. But then I've had people come to me afterwards and go, you know what? It's good that you did that, because what that guy said wasn't okay. And those people mightn't be comfortable enough to voice their support for you at the time. But you just realise that most of the time when you call out these behaviours, other people want to do the same thing. Other people feel uncomfortable and they know it's wrong. So by setting that example, you're more inclined for other people to then call out that behaviour in the future as well.
Because that's back to that gut, isn't it? That a lot of people are often feeling the same way as you, and sometimes it just takes that one voice to be able to have other people support them or give them the opportunity to reflect and come back to you. Absolutely. So that surprise can be sometimes positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we're going to talk about the idea of being an active bystander, because all of these things we've talked about is about taking action, is being willing to call out disrespectful behaviour towards women. And that's what's known as being a bystander, an active bystander, because it is about taking that step, and it's about being willing to put yourself out there and maybe have some difficult conversations. So when we look at what constitutes an active bystander, it's someone who's actually willing to take action to improve the situation. And it comes with a belief that you can actually influence the situation. And that's important, that even making a comment yourself or challenging something is doing something, and that's important. It also means that you don't always have to confront something face to face, which is especially important when you might be in a situation where safety could be an issue. And that's something we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes in more detail. It's about challenging disrespectful behaviour, but it's also being willing to role model positive behaviour as well. You know, it's about being proactive in that sense. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, because it's when we actually get active and take this seriously and do what we can, that's where we start to make the difference, not just passively observing things that we might come across.
Yeah, it's about you can do it directly or indirectly. And it's not always about confronting it face to face or face on. It's sometimes there's subtle things that we can do, and we're going to talk about different ways that you can be an active bystander, so that you have the tools and the confidence when you go out and be courageous in this, that you know exactly what you can do to be an active bystander. So we're going to talk about some safety, because to be a bystander, you need to be safe. And we want you to go out there and feel confident in when you do this, and we want you to be safe when you do it. The very first thing that you need to do is look after yourself. So think of this, when you're being a bystander, as like an emergency service. You need to look after yourself first. Is the environment safe? Is the situation safe? And if it's not, then the best course of action for you to do is call 000. But first, safety is number one. Second thing is to stay calm. You need to be calm at all times. Having another person escalate the situation is not going to be helpful. So if you can't stay calm, then you're better off staying away, because we need to stay calm. Assess the risk of the intervention. So you need to be mindful. Is it going to be worse if you get involved? Is that going to escalate the situation? Is that going to make the person get worse in his behaviour? Is that going to increase fear for people? And if so, then be an indirect bystander. If the situation does escalate with any kind of bystanding action that you take, then, and if it's not okay for you to be there anymore, then you need to back off. So we want you to be a bystander, but again, safety first. So if you start to intervene and things start to go south, then you need to back off, and that is okay. It's okay for you to back up. And again, if anybody is not safe, 000.
So once you have, I guess, assessed a situation and you feel that it's safe and a good and an important opportunity to intervene, there's some really powerful direct action that you can take. And it can be important the way that you go about it to, I guess, be able to get the most out of the situation, but also about how you can try and get the best response or the best reaction by the person that you're needing to challenge. So the very first thing is actually naming the behaviour, and there's a couple of elements to that. It's important to actually call out what it is, and that might seem really obvious, but when you're in an uncomfortable situation, then sometimes you don't actually be direct about what it is that you want to challenge. So if someone said something that you found disrespectful, then say, look, I just need to say what I thought, or what you just said I thought was inappropriate or was disrespectful, and then explaining why you think that's the case. And naming the behaviour is also important in the sense that we're talking about the behaviour. We're not necessarily talking about labelling the person. And I think that can be really important, because it might be something where you want to go, mate, you know, you're awful, you're this, you're that. But as soon as then you start to label the person and not the behaviour that they've just said, that's where you're much more likely to get a negative response from that person. Something that's very important is using I statements. Again, it's just reinforcing your belief and the way you feel about the comment that they've just made. Interrupting the behaviour is important as well. So there might be multiple comments that are coming, or even a conversation. So it's important to try and cut that off when you can, so that the disrespectful behaviour doesn't continue. And
it's also easier to do it then than wait, because if you wait, often the conversation's gone on, and so it's really hard to go back. It feels more uncomfortable to go back in the conversation. So if you wait till something's happened, if we go back to the party example, and somebody says something disrespectful, and you wait, and the conversation's completely moved on, then you almost feel really awkward to take it back there. So practicing saying it when it's happening and stopping the behaviour midstream might feel rude and disrespectful when you first start doing it, because we're taught not to do that, not to interrupt people. But you'll find that actually feels more comfortable than trying to go back to a situation after the conversation's continued.
Absolutely. And we're talking here about, I guess, comments about disrespectful behaviour, but looking at interrupting the behaviour, do you want to talk a little bit about what that might look like in the context of you actually witnessing some serious violence when you might be, say, out on the street?
Oh, well, if you're interrupting serious violence, generally that's an indirect bystander. So that would be 000, because we don't want to put somebody else at risk. The best option is to generally you can yell out as long as you're in a safe distance, like stop that, no. Generally, if you make a very loud sound, it can halt the violence, but as long as you're at a safe enough distance that the violence doesn't then become directed at you and be on the phone to 000. Yeah. So if you're in a very violent situation, that's the best that you can do, but you need to keep yourself safe. Putting another victim in the pathway is absolutely not what we want to do. So that's probably the only thing you can do in an absolute violent situation on the street.
Yep. And we're going to talk a little bit about some more indirect actions that we can take in a couple of moments, and a couple of other things to options that you can take is body language to show disapproval. And we're actually going to play a video in a couple of minutes that shows that point really well. And you can also use things like humour in cases where it's appropriate, because sometimes that's a way where you can call out negative behaviour, but in a way that might be a little bit softer and still make the point, but might be a little bit more comfortable for you in the circumstance. And the other powerful thing, which is always really important to finish on, is the idea about personalising and bringing it home.
Absolutely. Ask the question, right? What if that was your sister? What about that was your mum? Everybody has a mum or a cousin, sister, someone they love. Make it about that.
Yeah.
And see if that helps to bring it more real.
Absolutely.
So we don't want to wait for the victim to ask for help. In these situations, many times the victim won't ask for help because they don't know who they can trust, and they don't know who is safe to ask for help. So if you see something, do something. As I said, even if that means that's that indirect help or indirect support, the best thing that you can do is be a listening ear and believe them. If somebody does tell you something, believe them and say that you hear them and that you're there for them and that you believe their story. That's the biggest gift that you can give. Publicly support them. So again, if somebody tells you a story, somebody says that they are experiencing domestic violence, then support that story. Tell people that you believe them. Tell their friends, their brothers, their sisters, their whoever that they give you permission to tell that story to. Tell them that you believe that story. Focus on the victim. It is her story, and she is the one that gives permission to tell that story, and be there for her. What does she need? What does she want? And that's what guides you and what you can do. Be there for her, because at the moment, that is what you want to be there for. And just ask, are you okay? What can I do? I'm here for you. They're the biggest gifts that you can give.
Absolutely. And Jules, sometimes when it comes to disclosures and being there to support, it can be people that are very close to us, and it could even be family members. And I think one of the things that can be really difficult, of course, is that you want to be able to do as much as you can for that person, and sometimes people can go almost too far the other way, which is thinking that what they can do to support their family member is best, and that might be pressuring them to make the decisions that they don't want to make. And so can you talk a little bit about, I guess, what's the advice to people who might have disclosures of someone close to them?
Yeah, I think it's just about let it be their pace. Understand that when you are a victim of domestic violence, that it takes a lot of energy to be able to make choices, to feel safe enough to leave the perpetrator. And so on the outside, it may feel easy for you to say, well, just leave, let's go, and go into action. We, as humans, we want to go into action. We want to fix it and we want to go into action. And that's because you love them and you care for them and you're driven by that, and I understand that. But in this situation, all you can do is be there for them and let them drive and let them be the ones that decide what they want to do. And even if that is to go back home with their partner, support that, be there for them, and ask them if they have a safe plan. What is their safe plan and how can I support you to have one? And just believe them and let them do the journey that they need to do.
I think as part of that is understanding that, it's about giving the right information and giving them the support. It's not about being a counsellor, and it's about directing people to the support that they can get that's professional, and knowing that there are bounds on what we can and what we should provide as non-experts in this space. And that's about arming yourself with that information, as you say, so that people know the right support that they can give and the right services that they can direct people to.
So on that, we're going to go to a video. And this talks about action that people can take, so direct action, and it will be a fantastic way for you to see exactly in action what can happen. Over to you.
He's creepy? Nah, he's alright. You can tell she's uncomfortable. It's not a crime to look at someone. You know it's not right. Do something.
Supported by the Victorian Government.
So I hope you liked that video. I really liked that one because I love the conversation he had in his head, because we all do that, right? We quickly have those conversations, and he really debated, no, he's cool, no, he's not, oh, this is creepy, oh, I know this is not right. And then he did something which seemed like a really simple action, and that was just take that step in front and break that line of sight. It's a direct action. It was really simple, and he called out the behaviour by making eye contact. I loved it because Absolutely. It really summed it up, and he didn't have to do much at all. And then everybody moved on with their business, and the woman was able to feel safe on that train again.
That's right.
Loved it.
And something so powerful, but yet still doing it in a way that keeps yourself safe in the situation.
Absolutely.
So now we're going to watch a really powerful video that I guess brings together lots of these different things that we've been talking about, and it's talking about some of the disrespectful behaviour that you might see in the locker room. So what we're going to get you to do, hopefully you've got a pen and a pad in front of you, is as you're watching, having a think about what are some of those disrespectful behaviours that you're seeing, but if you found yourself in that situation, what are some of the things that you might do? And we're going to have a chat about it when we come back.
Footy's always been the game for real men. My dad played it, my pop played it, my boys will play it. And last year, we won the District Grand Final, first time in 25 years. So this year, start of the season, we turn up winners, and we then have to listen to some girls giving us a lecture about how women are people too. As if we didn't know that already. I'm married to one, aren't I? The board's gone all PC on us. They're putting in ramps and making inclusivity pledges, whatever they are. And now they're trying to get more girls on the field. This is footy we're talking about. Footy! They're spending club money on employing a girl to help make us more appealing to ladies. Not on the things that really need fixing, like the showers in the change room or new equipment. It's gone a bit far, I reckon. I mean, I feel for her. I really do. But when you send a girl into a locker room and tell her to talk to the lads about gender equality, what do you expect? She's so full on about it too, really serious. First session, she talks about consent like we're all rapists or something. That didn't go down too well. Next session, some of the boys had done a Photoshop number with some nude pics and her headshot. Shared it on the team Facebook group, and the competition for the best pic is now on. It's just a bit of a laugh. And she's a good enough sport. She laughed. They've gone even further, and now they've got some other chick who wants to start a girls' team. You should see some of the girls who are signing up to play. Bigger calf muscles than me. I reckon they play for the other team, if you get my drift. Who's going to watch that? It's not just the boys who think it's a bad idea. My mum does too. They should call it something else. It's not footy. Girls can't kick as far or play as hard as us. And that's the game that people want to watch. Real footy. This chick just didn't understand. She made a big fuss over a couple of jokes. Walked in when the boys were debating if she was a screamer or a moaner. Goes all women's lib on us and whines to the club president. The coach told her to lighten up and not take it seriously. It's what happens in club rooms. It's just locker room talk. What do you expect?
So Jules, there's quite a bit to unpack in that scenario.
Absolutely.
And you can imagine being in that case, there's lots of different direct and indirect ways that you could be a bystander in that scenario. So anything particular come in mind for those that have made their list at home?
Yeah, I think some of the conversations around, they want to change the locker room and they want to change they should be spending money on the equipment rather than the PC conversations. It's like, well, these are things that he thought were important, but really what is important is changing our culture, changing the way we see things. I think that really stood out for me.
Yeah, and I think if you found yourself in that situation, there's some pretty simple things that you could do at the time, and that is challenging the comments and some of these disrespectful things as they happen. And of course, if there's images that are being shared, the most important thing is to definitely not be part of that. But one of the things that really stands out to me in this video is the opportunity to be an ally to the women that are part of the club, whether it's the women's players or the woman that's facilitating the respectful relationships work. If they're experiencing these kind of barriers and this kind of disrespect, I think the more that you can support them and be an advocate for the women to show that there is solidarity from the men in the club that supports them, that is trying to create an inclusive environment, is going to be really important. And obviously trying to have conversations with the coach or other people in those positions of power to really reinforce that this is really important, is just lending your voice to that change, which is essential in changing that culture.
And I think if you're uncomfortable in it, then say something, because I'm sure there was other men in that locker room that would have been uncomfortable. Yeah. Not everybody would have thought that was okay. Yep. But being silent is being compliant. So you're being compliant that this behaviour is acceptable. Yep. And that's what we're trying to change.
Yep.
So managing the changes and doing things directly or indirectly. There's multiple changes that we can do, and we've given you lots of different tools and tips throughout this session today. So you can do simple things like changing the line of sight so that somebody can't be making those comments. Don't share pictures when you get them. Be a courageous voice. When you hear a sexist joke, change it, stop it, don't laugh at it, don't agree with it. Stand up at the party, be that courageous voice, and be confident in what you're doing. And we've given you those tips. Share when you hear stories and a woman talks to you, believe her story and be there for her and listen to her. And these are all ways that you can be a bystander, both directly and indirectly. So if you see any violence at all against women, then what we're asking you to do is report it. Call 000. If you're a victim of violence and you need support, and you're safe to do so, ask for it.
So we want to thank you very much for joining us for this conversation today. By you just being part of this is showing that you're wanting to make a difference in this space and that you're wanting to learn. And if we leave you with anything, it's with a challenge. we want you to be comfortable and build that confidence to call out disrespectful behaviour and to be an active bystander when you get the opportunity. And it mightn't feel like you can make a big difference yourself, but every time you call out that behaviour, you're doing an effort to set the standard of the behaviour that you expect to see in our community. And we'll just also leave you with a quote by Lily Tomlin, which is, "I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. And then I realised I was somebody."
Thanks for joining us today. I hope you've had a great time with us. Your next session is going to be a panel with all your facilitators, answering some of the questions that have come from the community. And we're going to end our session today, Liam, with a fantastic video of what people in your local community are doing to end violence against women. Thanks again.
And I can see a chain reaction happening, that if more and more communities make a stand, more and more communities of the ordinary people out there and our leaders in the community say violence is not okay.
I am speaking out to the community through events such as these, which are fantastic to help raise awareness.
The big thing that we need to do generally from a whole range of people is to speak up.
Challenging a bit of behaviour every now and again amongst those that your friends and family doesn't take much effort at all, so I really encourage everyone to have a go at that.
I became aware of the extent of domestic violence about 3 years ago, so my company became involved in doing sponsorships, charity runs like the White Ribbon City to Surf run, the White Ribbon Breakfast and race days to raise money for the cause.
I'm breaking the cycle of domestic violence by participating in this ride. I've put up a lot of advertising in my practice supporting White Ribbon and its causes. I'm entering into conversation with the people that I interact with on a daily basis as often as I can.
Look, I think education is paramount. I really do. I think guys need to hold their hand up and say, okay, it's unacceptable for one.
So we're using our position as club managers to challenge the behaviours of men who are old-fashioned and traditional and aren't moving with the times. So that's our window to talk to people about why it's important we don't make below-the-line jokes or commentary, why we treat women seriously, why we respect and value the opinions of women.
We believe it's important. It's obviously an issue in Western Sydney. We're a business in Western Sydney. We see it as being a part of our social commitment to the area, but also because we're a business that employs 80% males, we think it's an area that we need to focus on. We're looking after our employees and trying to have them think about the role of domestic violence in our community.
This is a man's problem. A lot of this violence is centric to men and the attitudes and behaviours we have. So what I'm doing to change that is actually talking to young people, to young men, and involving our business and myself with schools and programs such as White Ribbons Break the Silence, for example, at school level.
And by getting out there and speaking to the kids, going to the schools, educating them on the problems in regards to domestic violence, there's an opportunity to break that cycle and then hopefully in the future generations domestic violence we hope will be eliminated.
We are running many programs which are related to domestic violence, for example, White Ribbon Day. We, as responsible members of our society, must stand together to stand against violence, and it starts with you, with me, and all of us, because we are the next generation.
I took action to break the cycle by spreading awareness because I believe by awareness comes responsibility and responsibility action.
I think it's a great idea to raise awareness and teach the newcomers of Street Unity to let them know what is right and what is wrong, and we have to tell them that violence is not the answer.
I believe that education is a big factor in breaking violence against women. I'm breaking the cycle by educating not only my mates around school or anything, but also my
peers and family members about this ongoing situation so that they are aware of the issue that we face in our society today.
When I was a kid, I know a lot of violence. It's the only way to resolve anger. It's almost like a solution, but it's never been a solution.
If parents learn how to treat their children on equal level, girl or boy, one generation will reduce it. One generation will be okay from that.
To eliminate the cycle, we've got to start at home. I've got a 10-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. And just the way you actually speak to them and refer to women and boys and men and females differently affects the way they grow up. So it has to start at a very early age.
You know, I have, for example, 2 little boys and a little girl. Now, I know that if my wife and I bring those boys up the right way, they will be a people of good character, of goodwill, who are judged by the world on the quality of their hearts and the merits of their actions. Violence against women and girls comes down to a very, very simple question of fairness, of justice.
We have so far to go, but we, I believe now, have really turned a corner.
I know it's been perpetrated on me, and I have perpetrated against other people, and it is not a way forward. It doesn't stop.
And it is about men. This issue is about men. It is a men's issue, then we need to be addressing it. We can't ignore it. We all got a role to play in that space, and we all need to step up and actually do something positive in that space. It's not hard to do it. It really isn't hard to do it.